Kiwi. It's now 7:39.
The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
The voice of the creative economy.
With Vincent Heeringa.
Yes, from Idealogue magazines and various other magazines under the HB Media stable. It's Idealogue magazine. Vincent Heeringa. G'day there, Vincent.
Good morning, Wammo.
With some inspiration for us on this Wednesday, because I think we need it this week.
Oh, it's a little bit drizzly for the first time in yonks.
Which is kind of good.
Is this a particularly dry summer? All my lawn's half dead.
Yeah, likewise. There's a drought going on in Mount Albert.
Yeah, totally. It's drizzling nicely today, so...
Oh, good stuff. Well,
the lawn's coming back.
Today we're talking about energy sources, future energy sources, it is.
Yeah, this is a... I don't know if you've noticed how many little blinking lights there are in your home these days, Wammo, but when I was a kid, there was not much was electronic, but now everything is electronic. And if you add the amount of energy use we create as kind of modern folk to the vastly growing number of people coming out of the developing world wanting to all live like us fine folk of Mount Albert, that adds up to a massive energy bill that by 2050 will be some humongous amount that we'll need to find energy for. And oil, our traditional supplies ain't going to do it. So there's quite an exciting opportunity, but also a very daunting opportunity about where is the energy for the world going to come from.
So, has anyone got any ideas?
Well, there are lots of ideas, and the overall answer is that it will come from lots of places. There's no silver bullet. We're not going to develop one technology to rule them all. The answer seems to be lots of little answers, a sort of diversified energy platform that is... The analogy that I heard this week from a US academic from Stanford University, Tony Sieber, he makes an analogy that it is a little bit like the energy revolution, as he calls it, is a bit like the PC revolution. In the 1960s, there really were only a few computers in the world, really big ones, owned by the likes of IBM and ICL. And you had to be either very rich or a large company to get access to a computer like that.
And a lot of space as well.
Yeah, that's right. And you needed a kind of, a grid to be part of it. And then what happened in the 70s, of course, was the PC exploded and suddenly everyone had computing on their desk. And the analogy is kind of the same with energy, that they think that whereas we rely now on big energy plants down at Manapuri or in Wairaki or, places such as Huntly, energy creation, energy generation will be distributed and localised by solar and by wind and by access to your own geothermal supply and by tidal power. And the kind of localisation of energy creation is a lot like getting a desktop computer.
So let's take the suburb of Mount Albert in Auckland as an example. What, do you mean like there'll be a bunch of what do you call them, the windmills, wind turbines up on top of Mount Albert?
I hope not, because they create a visual offence, to my mind. Why are wind turbines white, by the way? Why can't they be green or black so they disappear?
Pink.
Yes, I think, there are some issues around that. But, yeah, there are lots of different options, and solar is one that's easily overlooked, Wammo. We in New Zealand are blessed with a lot of sunshine, and we all have roofs. So there's a huge amount of energy that we could capture from our roofs. And just to give you some perspective on the energy needs, before we go into the solution, by 2050 there'll be 9 billion people on the planet. That's a pretty standard projection for population, unless there's some sort of catastrophes. If we live like Americans, at the moment we use 14 kilowatt hours. 14 terawatt hours. Basically that's the big number that the world uses in terms of power. If we live like Americans, by 2050 we'll need 102 terawatt hours. So that's almost a tenfold increase in 40 years. If we live like Europeans, who are much more modest in their energy use, that'll be only a fourfold increase. But it does show, where's this energy going to come from? And the answer seems to be in lots of places, and solar is a very good option.
Solar's an interesting one because the price of it just never seems to come down. It always seems to be so expensive to get those solar panels.
Well, you see, that's one of the myths that I discovered this week has been slightly demolished, because solar has fallen, and the cost of solar generation has fallen by 90% since 1980. And, it actually is being quietly deployed all around the world. We don't see much of it in New Zealand, I guess because, the price of fossil fuels has been traditionally quite low in the last 30 years, spikes notwithstanding. But where solar is really starting to come into its own is there are two kind of big applications for solar. One is quite big installations in places like Spain and California, where solar farms have been built and are now creating quite huge amounts of energy. In fact, and I actually don't know if this is strictly correct, but Tony Seabuck claimed that half of California's energy needs are being supplied by solar parks in the Mojave Desert. But, we'll need to follow up on whether that statistic's correct. But there is, in fact, large solar plants in both those places, and plans being made for the Sahara, for instance, where a German consortium is planning to build a solar facility that's so large it could power quite a lot of Europe.
So these things do make sense overseas, but do we not want to go forward very quickly in this, because a lot of our generation comes from renewable sources like hydro? Yes.
Yeah, well, we're blessed in New Zealand with having, we have benefited from geothermal and hydro installations in decades gone by. So, we're lucky that almost 70% of our electricity needs are supplied by renewables. But I guess if you're looking at the third world and the developing world, that's another application for solar, where quite small installations, a little bit like a large satellite dish, you can install one Tony Sieber was showing us pictures of installations where the sort of size of a large satellite dish, the kind of thing you see in the suburbs that we used to see around the suburbs of Auckland, where people wanted Sky TV, and they'd put these large satellite dishes, sort of similar size to that, can actually power quite a lot of a village electricity requirements. And the reason why that's important, Wammo, is because there are so many developing places in the developing world that are off the grid, or at least where the grid is unreliable. And kerosene is the first choice of energy for lighting, for heat, and for cooking. And kerosene is, it's blooming expensive, and it's quite dangerous. It's very fumy, and the naked flame always, is a potential hazard. So one of the interesting things that might happen, in addition to these large solar parks in places like Spain and America, is the kind of an emerging use of solar by the developing world in a very localised and small context.
Okay, well, that's some interesting thoughts, and I don't know. I mean, is the future now? I mean, is any of this happening, right now, or is the future still far off? Is it still distant when it comes to energy?
No, it absolutely is now. I mean, these solar parks that I mentioned are up and running, and solar is now being embedded into buildings, into glass and into roofs. There's an installation in California, a car park for. Now, I just need to. It's Kyocera, the phone manufacturer.
Yeah.
They have a factory where the staff where the staff car park, the roof of the staff car park is basically one gigantic solar panel, and the next step is to make the staff cars electric that can plug into the solar panel of the car park and charge during the day.
Excellent.
So this technology is happening now. It's being deployed, and it's at least just one step towards meeting that gigantic energy requirement that we face.
Thanks very much, Vincent, for telling us all about it.
Pleasure.
Check him out also at Idealog magazine, idealog.co.nz.
The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Catch that interview in video on demand at kiwifm.co.nz.